So now we're going to do our remove method, and it's just going to be removing an item from a particular index. So that's pretty straightforward. If you want to code this, go ahead and pause this here. Otherwise, I'm going to get into how to create this method. So I'm just going to bring up a linked list here. So one of the things that we can do is that we can remove the first item, and we've seen this before. This is a shift. So if the index equals 0, we can just return this dot shift. Also, we can remove the item from the other end, and we've created code for this one as well. So if the index is the length minus 1, we can just return this dot pop. Also, we can't return an item at an index of -1, or we could say an index of less than 0. And we can't have an index that is greater than or equal to the length. So we can create an if statement that says, if it's less than 0 or greater than or equal to the length, we're going to return undefined. So here are those 3 if statements that we just created, and we'll remove those. Now let's try removing something at an index that is somewhere in the middle of the linked list. We'll do the index of 2. So we know that if we're going to return that item, we're going to have a variable pointing to it. And we're going to have another variable that points to the previous node, to the one we're removing. I'm going to call this before. Now let's just create these variables. And we can use this with the get method. So we could say before equals this dot get of the index -1, the index that we're removing. So the temp variable, we could use the get method again and just say get the item at the index that we're looking for, but that is an O of n operation, and there's a more efficient way to do this. We just say temp is equal to before not next. All right, so let's take a look at this code. So we have our if statements, and we have our 2 variables. Let's bring our linked list back up here. And this is the item we're going to remove. I'm just going to move this up here. So we want to have the item at the index of 1, the one that before is pointing to, point to that 7 node over there. So we're going to say before dot next. We're going to set it equal to temp dot next, since that arrow is pointing at that node. We'll do that like this, before dot next equals temp dot next, and that moves that arrow down to there. And that's all we're going to need the before variable for, so I'm going to remove that. And then we'll say temp dot next equals null to break that off of that list like that. We'll do that with that line of code there, temp dot next equals null. Now that it's out of the list, we'll go ahead and decrement the list by 1. So we're done with the list, so I'm going to remove those. And then we can say return temp, which returns that item that we removed from the list. So now let's look at this code with the rest of our code here. And that's all of our code for our remove method. And we'll look at this in a second in DevTools. Also, we're going to create this linked list, since this is the one we've been looking at for this example. And we're going to remove the item at the index of 2. So now let's flip over to Chrome DevTools. Okay, there is our remove method there. And here's our linked list, 11, 3, 23, 7. Okay, let's run this. Let's just open this up. And we have head pointing to 11 and tail pointing to 7. Okay, let's clear this. Okay, and let's run our remove method. And we're going to pass it the index of 2. And that returns the 23 node, just as we expected. So I'm going to clear this. And we're just going to have a look at our linked list, make sure that it all looks the way that it should. And it has a length of 3, and then it's 11, 3, and 7. So it looks like we have a working method for remove.